Okay, this is a story tentatively entitled The 7 Days, and chapter 1 is called Day 1. Shafts of smoky light glanced obliquely off the hunched figures seated in threes and fours around the massive tables. One of them, shading his eyes with one hand while hoisting a stein to his lips with the other, recognized a familiar silhouette framed in the doorway. He stood and with a sweep of the arm gestured for the newcomer to approach, spraying foam on a burly neighbor who was too deeply embroiled in rancorous debate to notice. The old sage, for so the visitor revealed himself to be after pulling back the cowl of his cloak, raised his staff amicably and scanned the great room. "Aye, shut the door, mate, we'll catch our death," came a muffled shout, followed by a general grumbling of assent. With some visible effort, the cloaked figure pulled the door to. Weaving through the clutter, he made his way toward the table by the hearth, where the gesturing man had resumed his seat. "Hail, sage! Come, warm your bones." The old man hung his cloak on a wooden peg protruding from the roughly plastered wall, propped his walking stick on the floor under his cloak, and eased himself into the empty chair next to his friend. "But I'm not the least bit cold, Trappist. I've rarely encountered a more delightful spring afternoon in this old city. Why, the trees are abud, the children frolic in the park." Not a bit of it," the Trappist sniffed. "Worse and worse from what I've heard. But the soup is hot, and the rooms are, well, they are familiar." The serving wench swiped the table ineffectually before thumping down a full measure of the local brew in front of the sage. "Another for me too, lass." The wench shrugged the Trappist's hand from her meaty shoulder and walked briskly away. "What adventures, man?" "None worthy of note," the sage, smiling, replied. Truth be told, though he'd found the Trappist a boon companion and a worthy adversary in debate, he knew that the recounting of tales from the road rarely captured the good monk's attention. "How long now, sage? A month? 2?" The old man nodded noncommittally. It had been more than 2 years since last he'd joined the convocation of scholars, clerics, mystics, and contemplatives perpetually gathered at the inn. "You may find the present conversation stimulating," the Trappist confided with a wink. He leaned to his left and elbowed the short, frail fellow who had been engaged in earnest conversation with a stern and striking woman seated across from him, garbed in the traditional blue robes of the Tuareg. "Our wandering friend has returned at precisely the right time, eh, Eremite?" The slightly built fellow nodded, frowning and stroking his wispy beard, but he said nothing. The Tuaregian glared at the Trappist, whose rather gourd-shaped nose was now no more than 6 inches from the Eremite's. "You were about to expound on whether the messianic figure passing through the clouds, as referenced by one of our ancient prophets, was traveling from heaven to earth, or vice versa. Were you not, brother?" The Eremite rose to his full height in an attempt to compensate for the woeful inadequacy of his pinched contralto monotone. Though I am generally persuaded, that is—" Of course, the Trappist boomed. The Eremite's face had already settled into benumbed passivity. The blue-clad woman surveyed the great room from right to left, evidently seeking more congenial company. "What say you, sage? By now you have familiarized yourself with this controversial episode recorded in our scriptures, have you not?" The old man shook his head. "I may have read it, but I find my memory to be no longer as serviceable as once it was." "I expect to learn much from your discourse," he said to the Eremite, who smiled gratefully. "Perhaps afterward, however, if someone will remind me, I will recount an event I experienced since my last visit that bears directly on your most ancient scriptural narrative." "No, I mean at once, by all means," the Eremite, relieved, pleaded with the sage. The others shifted in their chairs to face the new speaker. "Very well," the old man began. "I will be brief. As you have perhaps surmised, the road has taken me to distant places, distant times. I have been privileged to witness firsthand an event strikingly similar to the creation recounted at the very beginning of your holy book." The Trappist, who had obviously been poised to embark on a lengthy theoretical interruption at his first opportunity, stared open-mouthed at the sage. The Eremite looked nervously away as if trying to discover an escape route. The Tuaregite leaned slightly forward, her scowl suddenly transformed into bemused expectation as she turned her gaze onto the old man.